Okay, so now we're in Proverbs chapter 5, and I'm not shy about sexuality and talking about it in seduction, and that's what this chapter is about. But man, as I read it, I really see the spiritual implication of this, especially relating to Revelation. I believe it's 17 where it talks about the great harlot and how the world and the Babylon, which is symbolic of the worldliness, is the bigger seduction, which, sexual seduction and falling into sexual immorality is horrible and harmful. But we need to realize that sexuality is a picture of spirituality. And I talked about this with Sodom and Gomorrah. You can go back to that video. So as we read this, let's take this as advice to keep ourselves sexually pure and spiritually pure. All right, so verse 1. This is Solomon speaking. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Listen closely to my understanding so that you may maintain discretion. And another way of saying discretion is being careful. And your lips safeguard knowledge. Though the lips of the forbidden woman drip honey, and her words are smoother than oil, in the end she is as bitter as wormwood, or poison, or source of grief, and as sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps head straight for Sheol. She doesn't consider the path of life. She doesn't know that her ways are unstable. And so, man, we need to really think about this as far as our sexuality. And this could be male and female. I think we can, women can apply this to men, trying to seduce them. People who struggle with same-sex attraction, they need to think about that that's wrong. Even in the New Testament, homosexuality is wrong. And so as you feel yourself getting seduced by the same sex, you've got to resist it. It's normal in our fallen world. It's normal to have these sexual desires that we need to put boundaries around, right? God has made a way for us to enjoy sexuality, to be sexually satisfied in marriage with the opposite sex, and it to be one spouse in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, he allowed them to have multiple spouses, but that's different in the New Testament. And I've said it before, I think that's a picture. Number one, they weren't born again. And he allowed divorce to be way more loose in the Old Testament because their hearts were hard. But in the New Testament, it's one spouse. And I think it's a picture. And in the Old Testament, God was dealing with Jews and Gentiles. In the New Testament, he had one spouse, the church, made up of Jews and Gentiles. They're united. And I think having one spouse is symbolic of that. So as we see this, that man, and we got to consider porn. Porn, Jesus tells us that looking at a woman who is not your spouse is committing adultery in your heart. So think about that looking at porn can lead to this, that it seems like it's going to be enjoyable at first, but it leads to death. It leads to grief. All right. And those are the two main points. It leads to grief and it leads to death. And especially acting that out with another person, man, it will hurt. You can't have a good marriage if you're cheating on your spouse. And then think about this as other worldviews. Other worldviews are trying to seduce us, right? There's two main ones, I think. Number one, it's this desire to earn your salvation. We all like to see that we're good enough for God, but that's not the gospel. The gospel is that Jesus is good enough. Jesus took our place. Jesus died for us. And I have to realize that I don't have to, I can't earn my salvation. And so I've got to totally let Jesus earn my salvation for me. That's very anti-religious. Religions primarily form around you do this, and this, and God will accept you. The book of Galatians is all about that. The other side is this humanistic worldview, the atheistic worldview, agnostic worldview of that we can't know God, or there is no God, or, we just need to worry about people. It's a very humanistic worldview. The Antichrist, I believe, will really come in this worldview. And it sounds like with the mark of the beast, he's going to make everyone deny that God exists in order to receive the mark of the beast. And so there's that seduction, that there's this two-sided seduction of either trying to earn your way to God or totally ignore God. And they're both seductive, right? Atheism is becoming more seductive with the internet and with YouTube. And there's this huge community that supports itself on YouTube. And so we've just got to be careful that we're going to constantly try to be seduced by other worldviews that deny that Jesus is God. So be careful of that. Verse 7, so now, my sons, listen to me and don't turn away from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her. Man, we have got to run away from porn, run away from, I had a lady, I've only had a lady flirt with me once. I'm self-employed. And I went and I gave her a quote for some things. And then she messaged me back and said, I don't think I should hire you because you're too attractive. And I forgot the things but I talked about my wife, and then I just never contacted her again, right? You just run away from temptations like that when someone tries to get in between you and your spouse, or even if you're not married and someone just wants casual sex and they don't want it leading to marriage, which you should wait till marriage to have sex. But I know that's very difficult, but try the best you can. And it's important for couples to understand that they need to try not to be alone too much if they're not married, because, if you're attracted to each other, you know what's going to happen. Verse 9, otherwise you will give up your vitality to others and your years to someone cruel. Strangers will drain your resources and your earnings will end up in a foreigner's house. At the end of your life, you will lament when your physical body has been consumed, and you will say, how I hated discipline and how my heart despised correction. I didn't obey my teachers or listen closely to my mentors. I was on the verge of complete ruin before the entire community. And so that was my dog chasing a cat. And so there is, you pay a price for living a sexually immoral life. You lose money and you lose honor. I think it affects your body. And the same thing with spiritual immorality of worshiping the wrong God is, people are going to get to the end of their life. And if they live for a God other than Jesus and and in a salvation other than the gospel, they lived it for nothing. Do you understand how sad that is? Their whole life was nothing. They are cut off from God. And they have to spend eternity away from God and thinking about how they hurt other people. All right. Same with atheism or agnosticism, which one is saying they don't believe there's a God. The other is saying that they don't believe they can know that there is a God. And, the same thing. There are people who are giving their lives telling other people that there is no God or that you can't know that God exists, and they're fighting Christianity. Can you imagine getting to the end of your life and the shame you'll feel because you lived your life for a lie and you helped other people follow that lie, and they have to spend eternity away from God. They have to spend eternity thinking about how they hurt other people. How sad that is. So may that not be you. So what we can get from this is we have to be very loyal. That's the opposite of this is loyalty. If you're attracted to the opposite sex, you want to be sexual, that is fine. That is beautiful. Find you a spouse of the opposite sex. Find someone to marry who loves Jesus, right? It's that simple, and they're not already married, right? But if you're not attracted to people, then read 1 Corinthians 7. Paul says it's a great thing for you to live single. And then let's look at spirituality. You've got to just be loyal to Jesus, right? So as I go out and I fight, I'm fighting atheism. I've got a page, atheism versus logic. And then this page is trying to fight any inaccurate view of Jesus. And so as I fight false forms of religion, and as I fight atheism, I just remain loyal to Jesus, stay in love with him. And that's really what the next section will be about. It's about just enjoying marriage and enjoying being who you're with. So may you flee and keep mentors around you to help you flee sexual immorality and spiritual immorality. If you do that, you're going to die happy. You're going to be old. You're going to be wealthy. I think here you're going to be wealthy, definitely spiritually, and have eternal rewards. You'll be healthy and wealthy and wise, and you'll have honor. People will be like, man, I wish I lived my life that way. I wish I could be loyal to one person my whole life. I wish I would have been loyal to Jesus my whole life. So there's great reward for loyalty. There is great pain for immorality. So choose wisely and surround yourself. Stay in a small group and spend time with Jesus in private.